You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, and this week we have part 2 of 2 for our MH3 feedback, set review, set preview, whatever you want to call it. And there's a few things we're going to cover in today's episode. We have first, pre-release.
Yes.
Second, release.
Yes.
That's how that works. Third, what this is leading us into. Thematically, financially, game-wise, whatever, what we feel about this set ourselves and what we think it indicates. So with that, let's take it away.
So for me, pre-release was pretty unique. I've never experienced multiple LGSs capping Friday pre-releases that weren't midnight releases when those were still a big thing.
Man,
so my main LGS, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it, Top Deck Games, run by Nick Koss. If you have any attachment to NYSE, not only is he part of the setup, he played as well, so you might have caught him on camera. And they capped at 32 players either on the Thursday prior to pre-release or Wednesday. So one of my friends and I decided to go to another store about 20 minutes away. We pre-reg there once we found out that Top Deck was capped. And that was that. We played our event. Cap was 32. It looked like they might have been trying to expand to 36. That ended up not happening. We went about our business, came home, and pre-release weekend for that store ended there. I think they might have done a small one on Sunday, but nothing on Saturday because Top Deck was having the first RCQ of the new season on Saturday in Modern Horizons 3 sealed. And that is actually a very common occurrence here in regards to format. We are seeing, I think we just saw maybe the second or the third Modern Horizons 3 sealed RCQ in region, and only in July are we actually changing back over to Pioneer. And so pre-release weekend kind of came and went. I heard that the Sunday pre-releases were difficult because they ran out of pre-release kits. And in my mind, I'm like, that's silly. How many could you possibly fire by Sunday that you are out of kits? So I don't even know how the Sunday events were structured. And what I found out on Monday when I was playing Legacy was that one of my locals, who knows Nick Koss and the staff at Top Deck rather well, was like, you know what, I'll try and get into the Friday. If I'm the 33rd, cool. If they turn me away, that's fine too. And they were just accepting everybody at the door. Event started at 7. They kicked the commander players out, and they capped by space somewhere between 80 and 100 people on Friday night. That is why they ran out of kits for Sunday. Pretty good. So, yeah, they, compared to any other pre-release that I know of, including going back to Lord of the Rings, they were out of kits by Monday when my wife and I like to pick up an extra couple just to have around and crack for our own. And if given the opportunity to run back pre-release kit-based events, I'm pretty sure Top Deck and other stores in region would as well. I think the only one that didn't blow the doors off the event was the comic book shop, but that's because their play space only really has like room for maybe 16 or so. Okay. So I think they just continue to fire off pre-release kit-based events. Yeah. So for me in this region, it was just nuts.
Yeah. Here it was really good too. One of the most interesting things, though, I think, was that of any of the recent pre-releases I can recall, this is the only one from like the last 10 years that also felt like Ravnica Remastered. And if you go back and watch the episode we did on that, I mentioned that Ravnica Remastered was really unique because a lot of these old players that hadn't really engaged with the game in a long time came out and played. Okay. Because, shit, it was Ravnica. We played these. Yeah. And that made sense to me because they played those sets when it came out. It was really interesting, though, because the same people who have not engaged with Magic from my conversations with them since Return to Ravnica, or Ravnica Remastered, came out for this, and I was like, well, why? The amount of people that told me this set felt like an Urza block pre-release was insane. And I don't know if that's good or bad. But I do think it's very interesting that that's something that people noticed in terms of power level, because for those of you that don't know, Mero on Blogatog once responded to a question and said, we didn't playtest that block. It's pretty obvious if you play limited.
Yeah.
And there were also a large number of new players to Paper Magic at multiple stores. So in that regard, set was great.
Yeah, for sure.
But we also did cap everything. Most stores capped because a lot of people came out for this event. And I don't know if that's because they're wanting a break from the RCQ grind, or they're generally excited about this set, or they just wanted to get some cool cards for EDH or something like that. Although I would think, due to the price, your EDH crowd would generally avoid it, because this was not the same price as a standard pre-release, at least here, but that could have been due to payout or whatever as well.
I think the price was 60 in region as set by Top Deck.
Okay, yeah, we were
for us
55, 60 as well. So that's not your standard, but and it was really interesting to see that, and to see people actually talking about the game positively, because players in the store have not been the most positive lately, and that's unfortunately a fact. We have not had a lot of positive feedback about the game, but people were happy. It was just really interesting to see that.
Yeah.
Because we haven't had that at a pre-release in a long time. There wasn't any, oh, this common is absolutely absurd, this is busted, whatever. And that felt good to have a supplemental set that had seemingly a healthy sealed environment, if not limited. It was also, for what it's worth, one of the first releases I can remember in a decade where a couple of stores actually fired side events and were doing MH3 drafts.
That's
so
cute.
That was interesting to see.
Yeah. So the store that I was at, I know there were a couple people there that played pretty competitively. They might not be like RCQ grinders, but they play constructed formats. Yeah, basically. And there were a lot of people there that played more casually. So it definitely got kind of everybody out of the woodwork. The one thing that I was surprised to hear was that there were, at Top Deck, Commander players still engaging with Commander when the Modern Horizons 3 pre-release was going to fire, because I would have thought that they would have actually swapped over to the event, because this is a set with some big goofy Commander cards. It's the Eldrazi set. That's what everybody's calling this. Like, it's not the Energy set. It's not the set with some weird riffs on reserve list cards. It's the Eldrazi set. And Eldrazi are really popular in casual Commander. Big C, EDH. And so that was kind of surprising to me, but to kind of hear and feel the casual air of the store that I went to for my pre-release solidify the fact that, like, these events are meant to be fun. You're going to get everybody of all kind of play skill coming out, and you're just here to, like, enjoy the set for what it is, and it's meant to be this big over the top kind of thing, and everybody was really excited about it. For me, the pseudo side event stuff didn't happen until release weekend, when they basically ran like a Turbo Town. I don't know if it was on Saturday and Sunday or just Sunday of release weekend, where whenever there were enough people for a draft pod, like 8 somewhere around 8 at a minimum, unless they'd been sitting for a while, and they would just fire off drafts. And that happened a bunch. My wife played into back-to-back and then called it a day, but they were still firing, so people were still excited for this set as a draft experience on release weekend. And heading into that, and now coming out afterwards, there is the expectation that there will be one draft a week that is dedicated to Modern Horizons 3 until Bloomburrow hits. And then once Bloomburrow hits, if the draft environment is good, I would assume that people will step back from MH3. But if it's not, then I would assume that people want to keep drafting MH3 until the store is out of sealed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, release weekend was... Stores tried to structure as having time drafts here, or not timed, but like your drafts are here.
11, 4, whatever, right? Yeah. 1, 7, whatever it is.
But it very quickly became a fire as you fill.
Yep. Yeah.
And it was, stores basically, and one of the nice things is, we can start selling it pre-release now, but release weekend is when you get your second wave, whatever the case is, your extra allocation. And a couple stores held it back because they wanted to have extra drafts on release weekend. Because, and this is something we may touch on in a future episode, events that keep people in stores are very good. And that's something that a lot of stores kind of went for because, look, something that we've kind of noticed here, and I don't know if it's the same there, is a lot more players are kind of understanding now, or going back to understanding the LGS is important. And while we may not buy our singles there, we need to engage with it in a meaningful way to keep it around.
Yep.
So more people showed up for these events than we've had previously. And part of that could be the set, admittedly. But this time of year can be a little bit more difficult for some stores to get people in because it's summer, people are going home. If you're dependent on a college population for people to show up, they're just not there.
Yeah.
But the stores in my area that depend on that college population still capped. So it was really interesting to see that and to see people on release weekends still wanting to engage with the product.
Yeah, for
because I can't really remember the last time that happened besides just coming to buy your boxes and going. But they wanted to play in drafts. They wanted to play in sealed. They wanted to be here for these events, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, no, same here. Like I said, I think the weekends are now basically spoken for at my LGS, so we're not going to be doing any more fire and fill, but the players have demanded at least one Modern Horizons 3 draft, a week. And I think we're getting more. I mean, this is not an apples to apples comparison because OTJ's been out for months, but I believe the Modern Horizons 3 drafts are getting more players than the OTJ stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just going to happen because it's the newest set, right? But the desire from the players to start firing MH3 drafts, basically the week between pre-release and release was outstanding. They're just
large, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, come on, let's do it. We got to do it. I'm like, can't. That's like one of the rules. I think you can't fire drafts on a pre-release weekend. You got to wait.
Yeah, you have to wait till release weekend. Yeah.
And so
doesn't stop people from doing it, but you're not supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to put it through Companion. You can run it through Melee or whatever you need. Swiss pairings. Yeah, it's not that difficult.
The Konami app, it's the best.
But the sentiment on the set is still wicked high, and I think one of the easier parts for me to determine when it comes to a supplemental set like this is how many players are engaging with the store from a case aspect.
Yep.
And my store doesn't crack supplementals for the case.
Yeah.
They will only put cards in the case when they're sold. And it's taken a couple of weeks for cards to show up in the case. But we have a couple of wheels. Somebody found a 6 in the case.
Nice.
Not Zula Doc. What the hell is this thing's name? Haragast, Erupting Nullkite, like this.
Yep.
The myth, like one of the Eldrazi mythics. But there's some foils and non-foils. So players are opening their packs, selling back, and engaging with the store in a meaningful way with this set compared to others, or at least in a more visible way than with others, because when it's a standard set, Top Deck cracks it and puts it in the case. So if somebody's going to sell their Slick Shot show-offs, they're just going to go on the stack. It's difficult for me to figure that out. But for once, people are doing this. I didn't see any of that with Lord of the Rings, which is fine because that's also a property that people love. And so the cards are more meaningful from an art and a lore perspective. So I can see them not wanting to turn them around. Mystical Archives, or Enchanting Tales from Eldraine. Those cards started to show up in the case as well. That's supplemental stuff. So I know people were engaging with the store in a meaningful way. But we're finally getting there with Modern Horizons 3. We're seeing those cards come back into the ecosystem, and once the casual Commander players, the casual EDH players, sell back the Eldrazi that they were looking for, the case should start to actually kind of fill out with that stuff. And for me, that's also a really important element of engaging with the LGS, like you were talking about. I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, starting on pre-release weekend, LGSs can buy stock from players. They're not supposed to crack for singles in the case, but they can buy from players to put in the case. So we've hit that kind of saturation point here where people are looking to move out. And that might be different everywhere else. People might have started to do that release weekend or pre-release weekend because the set is so expensive.
Yeah.
And if you want to churn through, then move the Ulamog the Kozilek now, buy it back later, and get a couple more events in if that's what you really want to do. And so that was kind of exciting to see, like, honestly, for the first time, because I wasn't paying attention to it with the Enchanting Tales stuff. And
Yeah.
the Lord of the Rings stuff was just so sought after. It could have hit the case between the Mondays when I go in and been gone. But this is the first time where, like, good cards were in the case. So that was really important for me.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things, and it's really strange to hear. So most sets, everyone, don't bother. It's going to go down.
Yep.
There were a number of people that were like, no, I just need this for like next weekend or the weekend after.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And like getting it at an LGS. And people were trading in MH3 stuff they didn't need to get sealed product or whatever the case may be. And yeah, we saw the same thing kind of bear out where it was like, oh, people are engaging with the case for like singles from this set.
Yeah.
They're not just trading in the hyper-inflated pre-release stuff to like get duels or fetches or whatever else. I guess fetches, bad example in this case, but you actually had people doing that. And it was also obviously you had a lot of people that were hoovering up what they could from the game floor. But it was a really interesting event because it's the first time I can remember since the early 2000s that it felt like one of those big regional pre-releases, but at a much smaller scale.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I didn't play in a Lord of the Rings one, so I don't really have an idea of what that's like, but I did play in the Modern Horizons 2 pre-release and did not really feel this way. People were excited to play the set, but not in a meaningful way, and it almost felt like it's because the themes in that set were obvious, but not what people were interested in. It was a lot of artifact and gold stuff. Because remember, you had Nettlecyst, Urza's Saga, Cauldra Complete, the bridges, which are the artifact dual lands in that set. And then you had the weird like gold payoff cards. I cannot remember the name of the Boros legend. That's like whenever you cast a gold spell, you make a 3/1 or a 3/3 golem, like that kind of stuff. People were excited to play with the cards because they were new, not because they were like super hyped. But what you just touched on, trying to pick up what you can from the floor and from the case from the LGS is definitely something that my locals were doing for constructed formats. Like people need, obviously, Nadus and Shukos, Necrodomins, Nethergoyfs, Vexing Baubles, etc. The LGS portion of the store is not listed online, but Card Titan has an online inventory, and that is nationwide. So I had locals that were just refreshing Card Titan looking for Nadus, waiting for them to hit stock to buy the third, then buy the fourth so they could come in on Monday and pick them up and play, whatever flavor of Nadu they wanted in Legacy. So we have people doing the exact same thing here because they would rather engage with the LGS or in this case Card Titan, which is a vendor, in a more meaningful way than they would engage with on TCG Player. I don't think my credit transfers over to Card Titan, so I've just been buying stuff off TCG Player as I see it at a price I like. I can't tell you why Nethergoyf is still like a $15 to $20 card, especially when it's not doing a whole lot, but that is like the most frustrating thing in the world right now because I need mine for Legacy, and it is just eating away at my soul. But moving forward, what is this kind of... Like we talked about how the players feel about this. They feel super excited. Spikes are a little concerned with the cards that have been released, which is always the case with the Horizon sets because they're brand new cards. It's not a reprint set like the Masters. And so that kind of puts us now in this, like, what do we think about this set as it... Or what does this set mean to the game and what does it mean for players? And how do players actually feel about this set and its impact in the game itself? And I'd like to start at the last part and work our way backwards through that list.
Sure.
Everything that I'm seeing is that players are enjoying what this is doing to Modern. And some players are equally as happy about what it's doing for Legacy and Vintage. Vexing Bauble creates some really interesting space inside Vintage. Similarly, in Legacy, people are trying to brew around it. There are problems with Legacy still that Modern Horizons didn't fix, and problems that Modern Horizons 3 have caused. But as far as Modern is concerned, people seem honestly like honest to God, happy about what this did to the Modern format. Prior to the Moto deck dumps going down, we were seeing a pretty healthy Modern format. And aside from trying to figure out how to best beat Ruby Storm, which we might see in this upcoming Pro Tour, which will have just happened by the time this episode comes out, people are excited to honestly just play in a metagame where Nadu might be the best deck. Just a fair combo deck, quote unquote, or a fair mid-range deck. And they're excited to try and engage with that deck with the Jeskai Energy Control list, or the Boros aggro list that involves Flage, like we talked about last week. Not necessarily burn, but just Boros aggro. Or Jeskai aggro / control / mid-range, whatever it is, that also plays Flage. People are just excited to jam these cards, in Modern at least.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like, MH3 kind of realize what they wanted to happen with MH2, but they fucked it up. Because MH2 was a disaster for formats. And it feels like MH3 in a lot of ways is, look, we have these kind of, not necessarily fair, because I wouldn't say Ruby Medallion is fair in the shell of Ruby Storm, but that's kind of why it works.
Yeah.
To have these, like, well-designed, efficient but not overly so cards that we have.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really makes it different to me, is that, oh my God, this is fair. This is reasonable power level. This isn't a instance of Hogak just completely destroying the game.
If you want to tell me that there's a problem with Ruby Storm because of Ruby Medallion and Rao, I'll point to the fact that WotC literally put Flusterstorm as the buy-a-box promo. Damping Sphere is a card in the format. Prismatic Ending gets rid of Sphere. Mindbraid Trap is still very much a real card. Some of the options. Look, it's really hard to be Grape Shot behind a Leyline of Sanctity. There are a lot of ways to engage with that deck meaningfully, meaning you will actually have hate pieces for other aspects of the format. I think everything you're saying is honestly true, and I think that's what is really alluring. Even the free cycle of spells this time, despite the fact that it does include a counter spell, does not include a counter spell that is so overbearing that it's going to warp the control decks in the format, or warp the format around that singular spell.
Yeah. And it's not going to warp control decks in non-modern formats the way Force of Negation.
Yeah, Nikachu is putting up results with Merfolk. Awesome. Cool. Flood Moon is a great card, and that deck plays an amount of 0 mana counters split between Force of Negation and Flare of Denial. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Merfolk is an honest deck. If you lose to it, it's your own fault. I think that's great for Modern, where we're seeing things. We're pushing the scam list down and down and down. As far as players are concerned, when it comes to Modern, I think that it's fantastic overall. When it comes to older formats, I don't think there's a lot that this set does for Vintage, so it's kind of a moot point. WotC does what they do with Vintage. I think it's in a great spot. NYSE kind of proved that out, that Vexing Bauble, while it looked like it might be overbearing for the format, people were clamoring for it to be restricted on day 0. That's not the case. It does not need to be. It's great in Jewel Shop. It's great in Luris, etc. But it's not overbearing in Vintage. Doomsday is still a very playable and very tier 1 deck, despite Vexing Bauble, which should say a lot. And then we have Legacy, which is currently on fire, but not because of Modern Horizons 3, because of Modern Horizons 2. And nothing Modern Horizons 3 could save that, unless the BNR that came after the set included a BNR for a handful of cards from Modern Horizons 2.
Great.
End of the day. There's that. Then people are now starting to copy and paste the Dreadhorde Arcanist ban reasoning and pasting it over top of Moto screenshots of the Psychic Frog battles that are currently in existence. You can replace Dreadhorde Arcanist with Psychic Frog, and that's exactly what's going on Moto. So do I think Psychic Frog might be a problem in the long run? I don't really know. It's a really fair card. I played against it a bunch on Monday when I was playing Nadu, and it was scary, kind of, but at the point in the game where the card was actually deserved my attention, I resolved a Nadu, and a 3/4 is a lot bigger than a 1/2 without Death Touch that doesn't fly. So when my Delver player, who's already light on cards in hand, has to start dumping cards into that, it is a pretty fair engagement angle for me. And being on Nadum and I had white, I had my swords. So dump in, go ahead, and then boop, I'll just get that frog.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Like, that card is nice and clean. I don't think it's going to be an issue. But again, we don't know what's going to happen when it comes to grief. Exactly. And having this BNR and paying the same amount of lip service to that card again, and then saying, you know what, instead, wait until August, continues to prove that WotC just wants to let this format burn until either nobody wants to play it anymore in a meaningful way, or something is so overbearing that it's going to be 65-70% of a metagame, and then they might sort of kind of almost step in. And it is a problem. People are leaving this format, and there's no reason to when there are worthwhile events coming up. There is
contrary to their tweet, there are.
Yep.
Sorry.
We were talking behind the scenes. There is an event at Gen Con. It is
Legacy Secret Lair Showdown.
Yeah,
there's like 100K in prizes.
Yep.
And they tweet out, there's no big Legacy events. You're literally throwing one of them. You're throwing one with 6 figures in prizes.
Yep. And over the next 2 months, there's some untold number of 5K pluses.
Yeah,
Star City's
like
having
16 or 17, I think the list is at now. That's being crowdsourced.
Yep. Star City Baltimore at the end of July is going to have at least Legacy on Sunday. I know that much. I would assume that there's probably going to be Legacy on Friday and Saturday as well. So if you want to say that this format isn't being played, then you should probably actually look at the internet. And then I think it kind of came to light.
Scary place.
Yeah. All right. I don't know exactly where, but it came to light that I think a community manager that was in charge of watching Legacy, in charge of helping guide the ban list, told them they needed to ban grief, and they just went, eh.
Yeah.
And so what I've been seeing float around is like this stupid meme of like, hold on, data-driven decision makers, the vibes guy is here. And it isn't the fault of Modern Horizons 3 necessarily, but the sequencing of BNRs 2 weeks after a set release kind of put us in this dumbass cycle where Modern Horizons 3 comes out and they're like, surely things will be fixed, won't it? No. This problem needed to be solved 2 months ago, not 2 months in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really worrying things for me about this set is that it seems to reiterate Wizards of the Coast's soft stance because they won't outright say it. They say they love those formats and want to support them. Fuck eternal formats that aren't modern.
Yeah.
They don't matter. Or Pioneer too, I guess, whatever. It sucks, and I get it. You can't test everything. That's fine. You can at least ask people, hey, does this seem batshit crazy to you? Should Hogak exist in this format? Should Urza exist in this format? Well, no, Urza shouldn't, so we're going to be in Mox Opal instead. I digress. It just seems like it's more reaffirming of kind of what we looked at 3-4 weeks ago when we were talking about how CEDH has become this financial driver because these formats, they're not being supported by Wizards.
Mm-hmm.
And the community, which is awesome, is pretty entrenched in having the card pools already. So they've kind of just abandoned this, and it really sucks because, to me, it speaks of a greater ethos of like, yeah, we can't really make money off of those formats, and I get it. Your job is to make money, so let's not support them. Well, you can still make money by running events, and they just choose not to, except a Secret Lair Showdown that they forget exists. Whatever.
Yep, like, not banning grief also means that a number of cards that they want to see move, like see in the hands of players, won't be in the hands of players because there's no way to play them when the format is as rotten as it is. Like, there's a problem at the core, and instead of just trying to dig in and pull that worm out, they're just letting it eat away at the format. And like, yeah, sure, Vexing Bubble that works if you're on the play and you have it. Just like the grief scam thing works when you're on the play or the draw and you have it. But you can do that on the draw and it's fine. A little bit better than if you're on the draw with a Vexing Bauble because then you can get scammed just as well. Similarly, sometimes it's fine to have the grief countered so you can just reanimate it back. That's not terrible either.
Not
and
the worst.
It's not exactly what you want to be doing, but a 3-card Thoughtseize sometimes can be worth it if somebody's banking on that Vexing Bauble. Straight up. And I do understand that they put the pitch elementals in the set, in that alternate slot, but that's not going to sell packs to legacy players. The pitch elementals are cool, they're fine, they're dandy. They've been out forever. They've got new art, yes, but also that's not going to be a huge driver for modern players either. So you got to pick and choose your battles as well. And the impact of banning cards in Legacy to let your new set shine seems like an idea you want to ascribe to.
Yeah.
Like when Ren and 6 came out, that was not a good card in Modern. Not for a minute. But it sure was in Legacy. That card got banned. That's how good it was. Cool. Legacy drove drove the secondary market on that card, which meant people were going to be excited to open packs, find a Ren and 6, and resell it. They didn't care to who. But it was like a $75 card because of Legacy, not Modern. Like, it definitely drives some amount of traffic or in sales at the top level, and I don't get it. I think that's just what it is, and I'm ready to move on before I just sit here on my stump about grief. As I look over my backpack that contains Rakdos Scaminator, because if you can't, you have to play it. You just have to play it.
It's you can't beat it. You have to. It sucks.
Yeah. Anything else about Modern Horizons 3? Did we miss anything from player perspective? What it means for the LGS, and what it means for older constructed formats? We get it all.
The one thing that I did want to touch on, and this will be relevant later in the episode when I do my pick, which I hinted at last episode, is revisiting old mechanics and trying to fix them, by which I mean energy.
Yeah.
We all thought energy was terrible. We all thought it was bad. It needed more support. It got more support in cards that are actually high impact.
Yeah, for sure.
Strictly Better Gilded Drake is really good.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. When they spoiled Winds, I said I think this is the best rare in the set in the Discord, and I'm holding on to that.
Wrath of Skies, great card.
Yeah, that's what. That's it. Wrath of Skies. That's what I meant. Yeah, I think that is just the cleanest Wrath I've seen in forever. It deals with so much of the format at 0, 1, and 2.
Yep.
It gets every part of Urza's saga. It is amazing. The Drake, I bought a couple of it because even if you just steal their creature and sack it, it's off the board. It's a 2-mana pseudo edict in blue, which is
you choose.
Yeah. So I have my set in case it's playable. And the one thing I didn't realize, because I hadn't really seen it in videos when I was getting ready for the pre-release, but I think is kind of the crux of energy being good, is the Scalar Lightning Bolt. Yeah. Because the previous one was Lightning, not Harness, but whatever it was.
Harnessed Lightning.
Harnessed Lightning. Yeah, that's a Harnessed Lightning. Cost 1 and a red, which is a lot more than just a singular red.
Significantly.
Yeah, and I think that card is just so good and so clean. It gives you something. It makes, and all these cards make energy scale in such a meaningful way that you can build a control deck around it. And with Aether Revolt, if you want to play that in that shell or in Commander, you can just start spewing damage willy-nilly. You don't need to worry about like the Wheel of Fortune, or you don't need to worry about the Landfall Nerd that lets you draw cards, the Energy Looter. You don't need any of that stuff, despite the fact that it's all pretty high impact when it comes to energy. Yeah. There's such this tight, concise shell around the mechanic that it took them like 1.5 tries to get it right. The first time being in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt.
Yep.
The second time being the Fallout sets, like the halftime, and then this. Yep. And I think this is like energy actually working. I think they made their payoffs good enough, which is something we were looking for on the Fallout side. If you go back and listen to that, where I talked about how I just didn't think they got energy right again. It was just too weak. There weren't enough good payouts for it. I think this is a really good constructed set of payouts for this. It makes Aether Hub a really worthwhile card. Tune with Aether. Like, neither of these cards are being played, but it brings them back into the forefront of the conversation again of like, oh, we can extend out, we can do some Planeswalker stuff, we can ramp a little bit. There's places to put this energy that isn't entirely degenerate. We can play like a...
Yeah, we can build a fair game around this beyond just the limited environment, which is what we build sets for.
Yeah, and
it was really nice to see that.
And there's the counterspell, Arcane Spike or whatever it is. Where it's it just scales up with energy. You just make them pay X.
Much.
Where X is energy. I think like these kind of energy outlets are really good for the game. I think this is a really good call out that you made here. Is like this is a really good revisit to this mechanic overall.
Yeah, and it obviously we're never going to fix Storm, we're never going to fix Infect, but it's nice to see them look at underdeveloped mechanics and say, you know what, let's revisit this and try to make it more meaningful and impactful. And I think that's super cool.
Yep, exactly. So we're ready for picks?
Yes, you go first.
All right, cool. Yep. So we talked about this behind the scenes. I'm going first this week because I've got a sell call to make. So I've been tracking Rich Car's expertise from Streets of New Capenna for a rather long time. I put it on my list in February, but I've been watching it for even longer than that, basically since New Capenna release. And
I think you may have called it out as a good card on our set preview, actually. So you've been on it since spoiling.
Yeah, because it's just been a good card, but as I'll get to later, I think now is just the time to just let it go. We just got to move out and take our lumps here. When I put this on my list in February, CK was buying 114 at $1.25. When I was taking my notes, they were buying none. In February, they were selling 8 at $2.50. Now they're selling 8 at $5 on TCG Player. In February, there were 49 listings for $2.32. When I was taking my notes for the episode, there were 85 listings at $2.12. And since this is a couple of weeks later, there are now 109 listings with a market of $2.19. So the market is going up a little bit. So, like, cool, but whatever. When it comes to Commander, this card is old enough that most people should know what it does. It is 4 and double green for a sorcery that says draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Then it has the expertise effect on it. You may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. There are 5 expertises, one for each main character from Aether Revolt, I believe, and they all have effectively the same secondary clause, which is just you may cast a spell with mana value and then a value, which is the spell's mana value less 1. So Rich Car's expertise costs 6, so you can cast 5 or more. So that's what it does. You draw a bunch of cards, and then you can play another spell for free. So, from Commander playability standpoint, the reason why I thought this card was great was because this should be in every deck that can afford to play this, that also plays creatures with a real amount of power. Drawing 3 for 6 and then playing a 4-drop, not really where you want to be. Yeah, you want to be drawing like 5 or 6 or 7, and then playing a 5-drop. Like that's where this card shines. So this card works best within decks where they are regularly able to play and stick creatures with a decent amount of power, meaning they're there for a number of turns. In my notes, I said 4 is a fine number, and I think that's really on the low end. But obviously, the bigger, the better here, as you'll be using this to try and leverage yourself into a winning position, if not just from the cards you're going to draw, but the free 5 mana value spell that comes afterwards. There's a lot you can do with that space and try and win from there. A fun aspect of the spell is that the amount of cards you draw is determined upon the resolution of the spell, not on cast. So a well-timed removal spell can kind of muck up your plans. This is why this plays better in decks whose average power is higher overall, rather than one that is pretty streaky in terms of average power, where you got like a 2, a 3, and a 7 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And by fun, I meant like that's a really weird rules caveat where like, cool, somebody can just Doom Blade or Giant thing, and now you draw 2. Now, I do expect this to stay high on the Commander playability list because it breaks the color pie. It lets green just load up on cards really easily. And we can see the utility and playability of this card when you see that 11% of like quote green unquote decks on rec play this card. Like 11% isn't really overwhelming. That does speak to the fact that not all green decks play creatures with a lot of power on them inherently, especially when you start looking at like, what decks don't play this? A lot of decks built around things like elves, or druids, dryads, etc., that notoriously only have 1 or 2 power natively, and you got to do a lot of work to really get it up past 4 or 5.
Yep.
So that 11% is more like, oh, we're playing dragons or oozes or whatever that just inherently either have stars for power or power 5 or greater. That's really where we see this. So we're seeing it like pretty casually, but overall 11% I think is still pretty decent for an individual color like this. Timeline overall for the sell, if we're looking to really move out of any copies that aren't from Modern Horizons 3, anytime would be fine. We're going to run out of stock like soon on TCG Player, probably within the next 2 months. And if the price goes up before another reprint, listing now to be a little higher to sell out in 2 or 3 months would probably be just a great idea overall, i.e. just let it sit there until it sells. This does sell about 8 copies a day, and when I looked, there were 200 in stock for NEC and LCI being Lost Caverns. And I don't think buy list numbers are going to ever come back, as vendors can pick up almost infinite commander decks to crack this, and thus their stock never empties. That's why CK is buying a big old goose egg right now, because this just came out in Modern Horizons 3, and prior to that it was in Lost Caverns. Prior to that it was in Wilds of Eldraine. And now you get the idea. AFR, Neon, again and again.
It's been like every single set, literally.
And that's why it's a sell call, because it just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
As we head into the reprint equity, that's the first thing I say. This gets reprinted like once a year, and it's pretty easy to pump out in one commander deck a year based around some beefy boys. It doesn't matter what set it is. If you got a set with some chonk in it, throw a Rishkar's Expertise in the green deck, and it'll work. Cool. So we're probably just going to continuously get beaten up on this card every year if we sit on it any longer. Personally, I've had like several dozen of these cards at a given time, anywhere from Aether Revolt to somewhere in the Adventures era, or maybe Neon Dynasty, and I think I've moved them all out, and I'm just left with my playset from Aether Revolt and whatever was in decks, and I'm pretty sure I've lost on them over time from the first time I talked about this card on the podcast to now. But I think at this point in time, we got to look to sell this card, and we're just never moving back in. Just shove quantity if you can on TCG Player. Like I said, sell it high because it does sell. And just let it go. Just don't buy back into this card. Let it rot at a decently high price, somewhere in $4 to $5 range, and you'll probably sell it in the next couple of months.
Yeah, this is one that I am continually amazed that it is not worth more money, and then I'm like, wait, it literally gets reprinted every year, and it's not. You don't win the game with it.
No.
It's not like Primal Surge and an Azusa deck where you cast it and boom, you win. And if it's going to keep getting printed like this, if we're going to keep seeing it every year, there will never be demand like that for it.
There's also the part that the second this is a weird piece to this. The second part of this card that allows you to cast the card for free is mirrored on a lot of other cards that have been coming out recently. We can just point to Tooth and Nail and look at that side of the card. We have Summoning Trap after that, and a number of clones of Summoning Trap. But Outlaws of Thunder Junction also has the I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Trojan Horse. There's Smuggler's Surprise. Costs a green. It's a spree spell, and then you can pay 4 and a green. You may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So for a total of 6 mana, you just get 2 creatures.
Dudes.
Yeah. Which
Avenger Craterhoof.
Boom. Exactly. Which could be way more powerful for 6 mana than Rishkar's Expertise is, because Craterhoof, like you pointed out, rightly so, costs more than 5. So you have a lot of interesting options in the space for what you're trying to do. So there's also competition for the spot. And they don't play the same, which is great, because when you do that, then you kind of devalue both, because they're truly interchangeable. But because Rishkar's Expertise just doesn't put more something over the top like a Craterhoof that wins the game on the spot onto the battlefield, it, like you said, it's always going to be worth financially a little less than something that will end the game when you actually can put the Craterhoof from your deck or your hand directly onto the battlefield. So, all right, what do you got?
So, as I have been hinting at, I have an energy card, for one. And I did mention it last episode, and in fact, I mentioned a few reasons why last episode that I'm just going to repeat again. And that is Guardian of Souls.
Guide of Souls.
Or Guide of Souls, sorry. First off, this card is insane and limited. I just want to get that out of there. Card's nuts. But the reason I'm picking this is because, as we covered this episode, this is indicative that there is a level of revisiting that Wizards of the Coast is willing to do with mechanics to fix them. And this card is 1 white for a 1/2, and it does energy things. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life, get an energy. We have, as you touched on, a shell for an effect like that, and Soul Sisters already in Modern. Whenever you attack, you may pay 3 energy. When you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target attacking creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other types. Angel doesn't matter. Who cares?
Yeah.
But that first and second line are very important because this, within one card, both gives you a way to grow your energy and to use it, which is not something we have really had, especially at such a cost-effective metric in a color which loves tokens.
Yep.
Selesnya tokens is all over casual tables. This slides right on in there because energy counters get doubled. +1/+1 counters get doubled. So this has a lot of ways that it can play into casual EDH, and right now we're still seeing it hold a price point of around $4 with shipping on TCG Player. Now, we are obviously in release weekend, so over the next week or two, that's probably going to go down. That's when we would want to buy into this card. By all indications, MH3 is allocated. Not heavily, but it is allocated. Don't know if we'll be getting much more of the product until the holidays, because in literally a week and a half after recording this, Assassin's Creed drops.
Yep.
The set release has just gotten out of control. But this is a card that definitely has a place in casual EDH tables. It is definitely a card that could see play in a meta where Soul Sisters is good again. The thing that Soul Sisters always kind of missed was a way to close the game outside of Serra Ascendant, and this kind of provides you with that. Mm-hmm. So maybe it makes a splash there. But in terms of timeline, kind of tricky here. So based on previous Modern Horizons and Modern Master sets before that, when that's what they were, we always saw our spring-summer release become very limited. And we always saw more of the product right before the holidays when Hasbro needs to satisfy shareholders with their Q4. So we should see some more Modern Horizons come in for the holidays. So for now, we're still wanting to pick them up, obviously, but we're not going to be offloading these really unless we see a big price surge in the next few months until early next year. So it is a little bit more of a long-term hold for that reason, but this is a card that I fully expect, based on its efficiency and ease of use, to just take off eventually, because this is a card which isn't build around me, but it is... I've got 4 flex slots to fill.
Yep.
And if I'm in white, this is guaranteed going to be one of them. Because whatever I want to do, this helps me do it. It helps me win faster. It helps me gain life and use it as a resource, whatever. And that's why I think this is, and I am loath to do this generally with new sets, though sometimes I have. I did call out fetch lands, but they have a price history, obviously. I think this may be one of the big financial gainers out of this set long term. It is also noteworthy, a human cleric, which are 2 incredibly relevant creature types.
Yeah.
Not that, there's a bunch of cleric decks out there, but they do exist. And this slides in there and helps you win the game faster. Humans is obviously a deck. We have it in Modern. And not that I think this will ever see play in Modern Humans, but it might. It does drop off a Violet 1. So you could see it there as well if we ever get to a point where that deck is good again. But this is a card that has a lot of hidden potential, I feel like, and should be very, very good long term. Now, the other thing is, with the ambiguity of, is this a 60 card format card or EDH? I'm going for EDH playsets at a time, okay. 5, 10, 15. At the price point it's at now, I have, I think, 6 on the way now, and I'm going to order 4 more. Because I'm going to be sitting at 10 myself, because that's enough for me to reasonably offload by playset if it becomes a 60-card format card, or I can offload 10 pretty easily for EDH as well.
Yeah.
There's enough players in my area that play white that would want this card. I think it's just really good long-term, but it is, again, more of a longer-term hold unless we see a price surge in the drought between MH3 release and the holiday re-release, which obviously is not confirmed. That's purely speculative. But they do it every year with this kind of set, so I fully expect it to happen.
Okay. I like this card overall because, like we talked about last time, it just kind of immediately slots into a deck, and there are a lot of ways to build this deck. You just need to figure out how to do it, and there's nothing that really is too much or too little for it, because there are a number of ways you could take the Soul Sisters deck at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So when you can make something like this competitive, it does put a lot more pressure on the price point of the set. So that does lead to additional openings because people are more interested in opening when they can open for value. It gives people something to do with bulk, which is comb through it every now and again, which can also be exciting. And it also gives your constructed players something to do with the set, which is engage with it more in a meaningful way. They can either keep drafting, keep playing it, or they can go back and engage with the LGS and see what's there. They don't have to they can comb through and see like, oh, okay, I want to try the Martyr proc deck. It isn't too expensive overall. I need Guide of Souls. Okay, cool. And then there you are. The energy mechanic, I think, extends itself a little bit into a lot of what's going on with the rest of the set. There are some energy cards that play into this, into what Guide of Souls does. Yeah. And so that could be exciting to see overall whether or not this will be good enough for Soul Sisters, will be good enough for Modern without Aetherflux Reservoir, meaning if you wanted to play some of the energy cards or lean more heavily into creatures entering the battlefield in mass, it is a little difficult to attempt to do that and have Aetherflux Reservoir on the deck. So you just kind of need to rebuild, which is fine. There's no reason why you can't. And I think because of that, there's the opportunity for a lot of excitement around this card. I think there's a lot of good looks for this card. I think the commander playability of this card is also really high, like you said, which makes us a driver for that format. It only has one alternate treatment. I think it's the full art. So this isn't like a card that comes in a million variants, so you don't have to worry about which one to get, which makes it easy for everyone overall. You can kind of hone in on that niche. And it's just a really palatable effect. You're just gaining life. It's just a 1/2. It just makes a little bit of energy. Everything is really on the nose about this card. It's honest. It's upfront. Nothing is overpowering. It's just really honest and easy and fun to engage with. So I think this is also a really neat signpost card for the set. It just kind of is fun. Everything about this card is good and it's fun. And I think that's also really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love this overall, and I have nothing else to say.
So, likewise.
Anything else for this week before we cut out?
Nope, let's do it.
So for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt, I am Reptar, you are...
At Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.